Have you ever found yourself going back to someone whom deep down you know isn't good for you? Maybe the relationship ended. Maybe you promised yourself it would be the last time, and yet something stronger than your reason pulls you back. It's not just nostalgia. It's not merely neediness. It's something deeper, invisible, mysterious, something that takes hold of you from the inside and that you still don't fully understand. According to Jung, it isn't our conscious decisions that govern us most of all, but the unconscious aspects of our psyche. When you return to them, what is really pulling the strings? In this video, we'll explore the hidden forces behind this cycle, those Jung called projection, shadow, and unintegrated patterns. By the end, you will never be the same. Leave a comment. I choose to free myself from what controls me. Carl Jung taught that the human psyche consists of conscious and unconscious parts that interact constantly, even without our rational awareness. When you insist on going back to someone who repeatedly hurts or confines you, you're not merely making an emotional choice. You're being guided by unconscious forces, begging to be recognized. Jung would call this a process of projection, when internal, unintegrated aspects of your psyche are cast onto another person. The person you return to may embody a piece of yourself you haven't yet acknowledged. It might be your wounded feminine side, your needy inner child, your unprocessed shadow. In truth, you're not returning to them. You're returning to the reflection of something in yourself that has been forgotten, rejected, or misunderstood. The shadow, a central Jungian concept, represents everything you've repressed: traits, desires, memories. And when these parts aren't integrated, they tend to manifest compulsively in our choices and relationships. Thus, always going back to the same person can be an unconscious attempt to find and integrate those lost parts. Furthermore, there is the process of individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are. This journey demands that you face your wounds with courage and understand that repetitive, dysfunctional relationships are clues to what still needs healing within you. Behind attachment lies the soul's yearning for wholeness. But as long as you remain unconscious of these forces, they will continue to control you. Making the unconscious conscious is, as Jung said, the only path to inner freedom. Going back to someone who hurts us repeatedly might seem at first glance like an emotional weakness or a difficulty in letting go. But through the lens of Jungian analysis, this pattern reveals something far deeper: the active presence of the shadow. In Jungian terms, the shadow contains everything we have repressed: impulses, emotions, traits, and experiences that don't fit the ideal self-image we've created. Repression doesn't render these parts harmless. On the contrary, they remain alive within the psyche, seeking symbolic and relational outlets to express themselves. One such outlet is the painful bond we insist on maintaining. When you connect with someone who hurts you, you are often, without realizing it, encountering parts of yourself that have been banished to the unconscious. The pain of this relationship doesn't arise solely from what the other person does to you, but from what they trigger in you. Ancient wounds, deep insecurities, unmet childhood needs. The person you repeatedly return to symbolically becomes a gateway to your shadow, and therein lies both the greatest danger and the greatest opportunity. The shadow draws you in because it carries intensity. Even if destructive, there is a magnetic force in everything we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. This explains why some relationships, despite being clearly harmful, have an almost hypnotic power. They evoke something unconscious, ancestral, often linked to family patterns or formative childhood experiences. The pain we feel in these cases is familiar, and paradoxically, that familiarity makes us feel at home, even when we suffer. Returning to someone who hurts you can also be an unconscious way of punishing yourself. The shadow includes content such as guilt, repressed rage, shame, and self-deprecation. When these feelings go unprocessed, they manifest through self-sabotaging behaviors. You may find yourself repeatedly in situations that confirm an unconscious belief that you don't deserve healthy love. The other person becomes a mirror of your own rejection. This process is not rational. You may be entirely aware that this person is not good for you. You might even recognize the patterns, promise yourself you'll stay away, run through mental lists of reasons to move on, and still, something visceral pushes you back. That something is the archetypal force of the shadow operating in your psyche, demanding recognition. The shadow doesn't want destruction. It wants to be seen, understood, and integrated. Until that happens, it controls you from the margins where consciousness cannot reach. Understanding this dynamic isn't about demonizing the other person, but looking honestly at what they represent in your psychic history. Why does this particular figure awaken such dependence in you? Which part of you do they activate or embody? What aren't you seeing in yourself that this relationship insists on revealing? The key to breaking the cycle isn't more control, more willpower, or superficial distance. It's a deep journey of self-knowledge where you begin to name what has been repressed, to welcome your pain without judgment, to rebuild your identity without the foundations of a wounded past. That is the first step for the shadow to stop controlling you and start teaching you. Deep down, it is not your enemy. It's the map to your deepest truth. Projection, for Carl Jung, is one of the most powerful and hardest to recognize psychic mechanisms. It's a natural process in which unintegrated parts of our psyche, desires, fears, qualities, and traumas, are transferred onto another person, turning them into a kind of mirror for what lies within us. When you go back to someone you know hurts you, you often respond not only to the real person before you, but to the unconscious image you've projected onto them. You aren't relating to them as they are, but to what they represent emotionally and symbolically for your psyche. Projection acts like a lens. It distorts, amplifies, idealizes, or demonizes. Often you see in that other person someone who can heal you, save you, or fill what's missing. Other times they embody abandonment, rejection, or disdain. In both cases, there is a transfer of meaning that belongs more to you than to the other person. It's as if your psyche built a stage, assigned a role, and then chose someone to play it. The more unconscious you remain of this, the stronger the attachment, not to the real person but to the story they embody in your life. This dynamic intensifies when deep childhood wounds are involved. Jung said the unconscious contains archetypal images, universal forms shaping our experience. Thus, someone can unknowingly represent the absent mother, the controlling father, or the negligent caregiver. You keep returning to them because they activate an unresolved psychic drama. There's a secret hope that this time, the ending will be different, that this symbolic figure will finally give you what was missing. In this way, you are entangled not only with a present relationship, but with the entire emotional weight of a past it reawakens. When we project, we not only see the other distortedly, but lose touch with important parts of ourselves. The psychic energy spent on projection could instead feed self-knowledge, creativity, and personal growth, but instead, it's channeled into sustaining an unconscious fantasy. And as painful as that fantasy is, it offers a kind of familiarity, a comfort zone built on known suffering. That's why breaking projection can be so difficult. It means relinquishing an internal narrative that, although harmful, gives us identity. Jung invites us to reclaim these projections. The first step is recognizing that what attracts or wounds you most in the other may be an unacknowledged part of yourself. Excessive admiration or irrational hatred are clues that something within your psyche, not in the other person, is at play. As you become aware of this, the other person's power over you diminishes. The projected image begins to dissolve, and in its place appears the real, both of them and of yourself. This doesn't absolve the other person of responsibility for their actions, nor does it imply all relationships are mere products of our imagination. But it's crucial to understand that suffering lingers when we stay stuck in symbolic images and can't see the real person. You don't return to them because they are unique. You return because they carry a fragment of you, a personal story, an absence of yours. Until that fragment is recovered and integrated, you will keep being pulled back as if something essential is at stake. The deeper task then is reintegration, to recognize in the other what belongs to you and return projected meanings to their internal origin. Only then can you free yourself from the illusion that binds you and begin to see yourself with greater clarity and wholeness. When the other ceases to be a mirror and becomes simply another person, you finally reunite with someone who has always been absent, yourself. In many relationships marked by back-and-forth dynamics, there is something more profound than simple emotional attachment. Jung offers a crucial key to understanding this pattern when he speaks of complexes, autonomous psychic nuclei formed from intense experiences, usually rooted in childhood, that later operate unconsciously. When you find yourself returning to someone who alternates affection with pain, presence with abandonment, love with rejection, you may be under the sway of a deeply ingrained complex. This complex may have formed from early experiences where love and pain were intertwined, where being loved also meant being ignored, criticized, or neglected. The love and rejection complex creates a psychic circuit where suffering becomes familiar, not because you enjoy suffering, but because early on, your psyche learned to associate affection with instability. A child who experiences ambivalent care, sometimes cherished, sometimes emotionally abandoned, grows without learning to recognize love as safe and constant. Instead, they develop an emotional radar, addicted to seeking validation from figures who replicate that same ambivalence. The unstable relationship becomes unconsciously known territory. When left unacknowledged, this pattern repeats in adulthood with uncanny fidelity. You fall for someone unavailable. You fight to be seen, heard, loved, and when you receive any attention, you feel relief, pleasure, completeness. But soon after comes distance, coldness, rejection, and with it, despair. The cycle restarts. There is a visceral impulse to win them back, to prove you deserve love. It's not just about the other person, it's you trying to symbolically resolve an old wound that never healed. This dynamic activates what Jung called possession by the complex. In those moments, you are not in control. It's as if you are overtaken by a psychic force that thinks, feels, and acts for you. You know you're hurting yourself but can't stop. You see that this person is not truly present, but cling to the hope that one day they will be. That hope is not logical. It is emotional, ancestral, unconscious. It is the wounded child within you trying to rewrite the original ending, where love and rejection walked hand in hand. Moreover, this complex often intertwines with unconscious beliefs of unworthiness. You may, without realizing, seek relationships where you're treated coldly because at a deep level, you believe that is the kind of love you deserve. The complex sustains this belief, reinforcing the cycle. With each rejection, your sense of insufficiency grows, and the more you feel inadequate, the more you try to prove your worthiness of love, usually with someone incapable of offering it healthily. The repetition isn't random. It's the unconscious calling for resolution. Jung asserted that the unconscious always seeks totality, healing, reintegration, and to achieve that, it repeats the trauma, not to punish you, but to offer a new chance to address it differently. But this new response is only possible when you become conscious of the complex, when you begin to see the wounded child behind the loving adult, when you understand that it isn't love holding you, but the need to heal a pain predating this relationship. Liberating yourself from this pattern doesn't happen overnight. It demands presence, self-observation, and above all, compassion. You must look at yourself with tenderness, recognize the trauma's origin, embrace the pain, and gradually learn to build a new inner model of love, one that doesn't depend on another's instability, but is nourished from within. Only then does the complex lose its power. Only then does repetition give way to conscious choice, and what once imprisoned you becomes a portal to self-knowledge and healing. The process of individuation, central to Jung's psychology, is the path by which an individual becomes who they truly are, not what the world, family, or traumas expect of them, but what their soul yearns to manifest. When we speak of returning to a relationship that harms us, we face a crossroads between remaining in the known cycle and enduring the pain of separation to finally become whole. This turning point is, in fact, a crucial moment in the individuation journey. It is when the ego, the conscious part that acts and decides, begins to listen to the self, which represents the center and totality of the psyche. Breakups, especially those involving deep emotional bonds, aren't just endings. They are rites of passage, symbolic moments when the soul asks to be freed from what imprisons it, not only externally but internally. Always returning to someone who destabilizes us emotionally signals that something within us hasn't integrated or matured. The individuation process demands confronting this without escape or denial, with radical courage. But the true break doesn't start with the other person. It begins with an internal rupture of illusions, the need to be rescued, the notion that love is only valid if accompanied by suffering, the belief that you cannot live without that person. Liberation isn't about the other. It's about freeing yourself from the narrative you built about yourself through them. Jung said no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by bringing the darkness into consciousness. In other words, to truly break free, you must face the pain still dwelling within you. The pain that makes you accept emotional scraps out of fear of being left alone with your own emptiness. Individuation necessarily involves integrating the shadow, the anima, and the animus, the inner feminine and masculine aspects we project onto others. When you find yourself trapped by someone who embodies everything that attracts and destroys you, you are often dealing with the projection of a negative animus for women or a negative anima for men. These inner figures become dominant when unrecognized, causing the other person to seem like the sole source of wholeness. Yet individuation demands withdrawing that projection and beginning to nurture those aspects within yourself, the unconditional love, the protective strength, the guiding wisdom. Thus, a breakup is not merely physical separation, it's an internal process of reclaiming the parts you handed over to the other. It's reconnecting with your dignity, your values, your soul. It means ceasing to live in the other's reflection and starting to build your own light. It's not about eliminating love, but transforming attachment into understanding, suffering into wisdom, loss into rebirth. True separation brings pain, yes, but also a freedom once thought impossible, the freedom to be whole without leaning on another as an emotional crutch. This transformation doesn't occur in a single gesture, but in daily acts of awareness. Choosing not to respond, choosing not to idealize, choosing to turn inward whenever longing strikes. Each of these decisions nourishes the individuation process. Each act of self-care, each boundary set, each honored silence is another step toward a more mature love, one that begins within you and doesn't depend on external validation. In the end, what binds you to them isn't love. It's an unconscious pattern begging to be healed. And what frees you isn't physical distance, but the decision to continue becoming who you were born to be. True liberation isn't forgetting the other, it's remembering yourself. And that is only possible when you choose to walk the path of individuation with presence, responsibility, and courage. Returning again and again to someone who harms you isn't weakness. It's a symptom of the soul calling for healing. Depth psychology shows us that what entangles us with another is, in truth, a reflection of what hasn't yet integrated within us. The shadow, projection, complexes, and absence of a conscious individuation process create invisible yet incredibly potent bonds. When you understand that these cycles aren't punishments but invitations to self-knowledge, everything begins to change. The way out isn't in another person. It's in you. It's in the courage to look inward, to welcome your pain, to reclaim the parts you surrendered, and to transform unconscious patterns into conscious choices. That is the power of analytical psychology. It doesn't hand you ready-made answers, but teaches you to walk toward your own truth. If this content resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Here you'll find deep reflections based on Carl Jung's teachings that can transform how you live, love, and understand yourself. And before you go, watch the next video on the screen. It's the perfect continuation of this journey of self-knowledge and liberation. Your soul thanks you for every step you choose to take toward your wholeness.